Natasha Deen. Together we read. Together we read. World Builders.
It should have been one of those quiet evenings that makes a person happy to be home. The rain drummed against the windows, and in the hearth, a fire burned bright and warm. Lamps poured golden light on thick rugs and overstuffed couches, and lent security from the cold damp outside. However, the peacefulness of the scene was marred by the tension in the room. Briscoe, my best friend, and I had been fighting. It wasn't one of those arguments where we yelled and screamed. It was a quiet sort, full of unspoken words and hurt feelings. He lay on the sofa, curled up with his newspaper. The lamp above him gave his dark hair a gold outline and traced the angular lines of his lean frame. I sat with my notebook in hand, listening to the soft hiss of the gas lamps and trying to jot down our last adventures before the details eluded me. On the table beside my work, the remnants of a puff pastry littered the blue-edged saucer. I glanced at my ample waistline and debated if eating a third cream puff constituted gluttony, reminding myself that we might have to chase a suspect and that my waistcoat had become harder and harder to button closed. I opted for restraint and went back to my writing. "Confounded boots," Briscoe said, tossing the evening papers aside. "What are you doing?" I sat back and wiped the blue ink from the quill with a cotton handkerchief. Setting our latest escapade to paper. No need to tell him of the greedy thoughts and desires of my stomach. My publisher wants to see the entire draft by next week. His nose twitched. Not that drivel again. It isn't drivel. My voice hitched higher with protest. We saved a lady's maid from being sent to a debtor's prison. And what of the things we discovered about slum housing? I stopped, caught off guard by the flood of memories. Those despicable places haunted my sleep and followed my waking moments. You of all people should welcome the opportunity to bring the details of our last case to the public and educate them. His brown eyes widened in subtle challenge. I? More than any other person? Well, his irritation left me floundering for a delicate way to broach the issue of his past. I thought, perhaps, with your experiences, you would want people to know. He lifted an eyebrow, and that said more than if he had spoken for hours. Briscoe had never been an easy person to live with, but lately he had been extra irritable. The reason was clear. His new case. His, not ours. I was in the cold. Left out of the investigation, I'm ashamed to admit it made me edgy and quick to fight. These adventures are not just yours, but mine as well. If I want to publish them, it is my right. Truly, Boots, a person of your intellect and passions could find a better use for his time. He reached for his reading once more. I don't know why you continued with becoming an author. There is no money in it. His face disappeared behind the paper. Why don't you just buy the publisher? At least then you could guarantee yourself a published book. I felt hot and slighted by his contempt, and his jab at my family's wealth. It had afforded me a private education and access to the finer things in life, and Briscoe had joined our family 2 years ago. Our competitive nature had us graduating from school early. There was talk of college, but both of us wanted to do something exciting and not related to books or schoolwork. We had been fascinated with the disturbing murders committed by Jack the Ripper in Whitechapel. What kind of man would commit such monstrosities, and how was it that the police had never caught him? The idea of pursuing criminals, bringing them to justice, and keeping decent people safe was a thing that appealed to both of us. Once school had finished, and though the Ripper cases were 7 years in the past, we'd opened up our business. At first, the cases were pitiful. A lady's lost locket, a gentleman looking to find out who'd pilfered his pocket watch. But as time passed and people became comfortable looking at our skills rather than our age, the crimes became grittier, with more to be lost if left unsolved. We weren't yet at a point where the cases paid for everything. My trust fund covered a small apartment in a cozy area of London, but it would not be long before we were no longer reliant on my family's wealth to pay for our lodging. The flush of gaining success dimmed as recollection brought me back to my exclusion of the current case. Since I am not part of the current investigation, there is no reason for me to ignore my other pursuits. The papers dipped. He said nothing, only watched me from over the top of the Daily Mail. I hated it when he did this. Silence. It was his best weapon because it never failed to defeat me. I shuffled the papers on my desk. It is important that the city know of this case, of the terrible conditions some of its citizens are forced to live in. His face wrinkled. Leave this case to memory, Boots. Do not drag it into the light of public scrutiny. This was an old debate. He thought turning our cases into stories made us seem more like fictional characters than real people. The publisher requested it, and this is the farthest I've ever gotten with an editor. I will not break my word. If you can have cases separate from me, then I can have aspects of my life that do not include you. Besides, my voice rose with the ferocity born of seeing the disgraceful, humiliating way some of the city's residents were forced to live. The owners of those slums need to be revealed and suffer the public's wrath. How can they justify leaking roofs, no heats, crowding families into 2 small rooms? It is nothing short of evil to sacrifice basic survival in the name of profit. He jumped up and made his way to where I sat. This cannot be an issue between us. We both stopped, spun as our front door slammed open and ended our feud in one loud crash.